All right, the topic of how to fix the Democratic Party. This keeps coming up in different ways, and the context has been just the election results of 2016, right? Losing to Donald Trump, if you're in the Democratic Party, should really make you question, well, we have a problem and we need to fix it. How do we do it? DNC meddling and this general problem of corporate Democrats, the problem of Tom Perez as DNC chair, sort of continuing this establishment Democrat problem. And then, of course, the urgency of suppressing Trumpism, right? What can Democrats do in the immediate to try to prevent or suppress the ideas of the Trump administration, however harebrained and ragtag they may be? And they're pretty harebrained, as we've been covering for more than 9 months at this point. So there's a macro and a micro here, right? An example of the macro that needs to be discussed is Democrats need to move to the left. Democrats need to take stronger progressive positions on important issues. Micro would be maybe the superdelegates need to go. Maybe that's something that we need to look at. And recently, we've actually heard some calls from some Democratic elected officials saying that superdelegates have to go. Bernie Sanders recently wrote an article with the same title, How to Fix the Democratic Party, in Politico. And it included some interesting things, some ideas that I found a little bit less relevant. And I wanted to discuss this. And this is not meant to be all encompassing, but I'm going to talk about some of the areas in which Democrats Inc. really needs to shape up. And the first step in any intervention is you've got to admit that you have a problem, right? And Bernie Sanders points this out, and it's abundantly true, which is the current strategy just isn't working. What I call Democrats Inc. have lost 1,000 seats in state legislatures in the U.S. in I don't know how many years. Republicans now control the House and the Senate and more than 30 of the 50 governorships and, of course, the White House. And in the end, remember, we lost to Donald Trump. Despite demographics shifting in the favor of the Democratic Party over the last 15, 20 years, despite Donald Trump being this incompetent buffoon appealing to the lowest common denominator, we still lost as progressives through the Democratic Party. And again, I'm not a Democrat, but I'm a progressive. And right now, I still see the Democratic Party as a major conduit to possible progressivism. Listen to myself even hedging that language, right? It's not good when you lose to Donald Trump. So let's start going through a list of some things that Democrats should do, starting with you got to fix the DNC, right? Meaning, number one, get a real progressive running it. And number two, stop messing with the primaries. The DNC as this unbiased, impartial arbiter of the primary process, that's a pipe dream that was destroyed by what took place in 2016. You got to fix the DNC at the you got to fix Democrats at the DNC level, number one. Number two, get rid of superdelegates. Superdelegates, I get it, right? They are there supposedly to protect against some crazy, wacky insurgent. This isn't the Republican Party, right? The left-wing equivalent of Donald Trump isn't going to win the Democratic primary merely because you get rid of superdelegates. And I believe it is time for superdelegates to go. Number three, work endlessly, tirelessly on preventing voter suppression. And that means you also have to work on voter registration. It's sort of a two-part thing. I've said it before. The time it will take you to convince a Trumpist not to vote for his reelection in 2020, you could get 10 people who are already sort of on the left but may never have voted out to the polls, or at least 5 people, whatever. There's some big imbalance there in the amount of time, and preventing the voter suppression, right? That is a major thing. Republicans have been super upfront about the fact that they realize the demographics are increasingly on the side of Democrats. Do not let Republicans suppress the vote. And that doesn't mean 3 months before the election to start blogging about irregularities with voting machines in Pennsylvania, right? That means now. That means now we have to be working on preventing the voter suppression tactics from succeeding. Now, let's talk a little bit about policy, all right? Number 4, on policy, move to the left. And this applies to a number of different issues. Healthcare, there needs to be a more decided left-wing push. There is a debate to be had about whether or not the Democratic Party should make it their platform to have single-payer healthcare. Bill Scher, for example, and many of you disagreed with his view, and I disagreed with it to a great extent, Bill Scher said, it's a mistake for Democrats to say our policy, our platform is now single payer. Our platform should be improving Obamacare. I don't necessarily agree with Bill Scher. You don't have to. But what's clear is you got to move to the left on healthcare. And it can't be, it would be nice to have a public option if it's okay, but if not, we'll get rid of that as well. That's a weak position. Okay, that can't be the position on healthcare for Democrats. Move left on a living wage, right? Lots of issues when it comes to living wage. It's not just minimum wage. It's way more when we talk about a living wage. It has to do with cost of living. It has to do with inequality. I'm not going to get into the minutia of it now because this is an overview, but on a living wage, there are a number of ways that this needs to be approached. And then this gets to this broader issue that needs to be a core Democratic issue, which is number 5 on my list, which is a focus on economic fairness. Economic fairness includes income and wealth inequality, which connects to the minimum wage, but it also includes corruption and cronyism, this swamp draining that, of course, the opposite of which is actually happening under Donald Trump. The fact that we have 2 justice systems in the United States, one for the rich and one for everyone else, or maybe we say one for the poor and then one for everybody else. I don't know exactly how you want to slice and dice it, but we have at least 2 economic justice systems, rather. And that connects to the war on drugs as well. So economic fairness, and make it an issue of patriotism, as George Lakoff has suggested Democrats should frame it. Number 6, get out of the pragmatism illusion, okay? I am a pragmatist, sometimes to such a degree that people in our audience get irritated with me. But sometimes we fall for the pragmatism illusion, which ends up being a way to sort of hide corporate Democrats' commitment to the status quo and not having actual policy ideas that reflect where the public is, which generally is to the left of the Democratic Party. Number 7, get away from losing issues, okay? And we can debate which issues those are. There's those who say gun safety is a losing issue for Democrats, not because it isn't important, but because even after Sandy Hook, with 85 or 90% public approval and President Obama in the White House and seemingly the best opportunity to pass 100% background checks, it still couldn't be done. And there's this idea that guns and other issues, and we could come up with the list on another day, that there are losing issues that are only going to get people to vote against you and won't really get people to vote with you, so that you've got to get away from those losing issues. And number 8, don't ignore the white working class. Now, I want to be really careful with how I explain this. I'm not saying that Democratic policy wouldn't be better for the white working class than Republican policy. It would be. There's no doubt about that. But the impression in the last election among many working class whites was that the Democrats don't really care about them. I don't believe that that's true. I believe that the policies of someone like Bernie Sanders would not only be good for non-white voters, but they would also be good for working class white voters. But you've got to make it clear that that's the case. So this is a difficult time to really make these changes. And usually it doesn't happen this way. I've been reading Hunter S. Thompson's book, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, which is about the 1972 campaign of George McGovern against Richard Nixon, the primary and the eventual loss to Richard Nixon in 72. And in the book, it's explained that were McGovern, this is the idea of Hunter S. Thompson, and I think there's a lot to it, were George McGovern to have won in November of 1972, he could have completely upended the structure of the Democratic Party. But the fact that McGovern lost, which is what happened, right? It made it so that the Democratic Party immediately went back to the good old boys stuff. And we have to make sure that we don't see a resurgence, and the Tom Perez selection as DNC chair scares me in this way, that we don't see a resurgence and a sort of planting of the feet or burying of the head in the sand away from the Bernie Sanders direction and more towards the sort of corporate Democrats Inc. direction. Not exactly an analogous situation, but I think there's a relevant lesson from 1972 in thinking about 2016 and the path forward. We'll go into each of these points in more detail over the coming months and in the lead up to the midterm election, but those are some of my ideas that I have so far, and I'd love to hear from our audience about it. The video you just finished watching was made possible by you through the membership program. You can sign up for membership at davidpakman.com/membership. We are viewer-supported independent media. You can use the coupon code IVoted17 for a 40% discount off of your membership.